like all beginnings, mine were fairly humble. It's amazing what you can do in real life, even more amazing what you can do in Football Manager. It's where it all started for me. It's probably not too long after it sort of came out, and then around that time I was also working with the national teams, and national team football is really great, but you get a lot of downtime in between. So once I started, fair to say, like most people, it was you're all in. I love the concept, and very similar to kind of what I was doing at the time, but also an extension of that because you had a little bit of freedom in the game to kind of do things that in real life doesn't allow you to do. Oh, look, I think like most, I love taking the small club all the way to the highest possible levels. And I guess the one for me was Southend United. The only reason I picked them was because they were the closest I could find to South Melbourne, the club I grew up and played with. So the South was in the name, and took them all the way to a Champions League. And my greatest moment, but also my biggest heartbreak, is they sacked me 6 months later when I was expecting a statue. So just goes to show. I took on the big clubs as well, but that kind of success wasn't as fulfilling. But then it was about trying to sort of find the next star, and I was pretty aggressive transfer wise. I didn't sit on players for too long and was constantly moving around. So I had a fair few successes. I went down the Freddie Adu rabbit hole, which everyone does, and he was unbelievable. But also because of my background, I was kind of national youth team manager. I went to 6 World Youth Cups. There was a lot of young players I saw when they were 17 and 18, and they were popping up on Football Manager and as young talent, and I loved grabbing hold of them, people like Carlos Vela and others, and taking them all the way to the top. With Football Manager, you saw the effect that data had, and I think in many respects it was a precursor to kind of where recruitment and transfer dealings went to. So, I love that. Just having such a massive database of players, at the touch of a finger, and it pretty much has become real life now. When you're talking about as a real life manager trying to recruit players, that's your starting point. And football's evolved over time, but it's always been about my team having the ascendancy in terms of having more of the ball, but also, more of the ball in the attacking half. So it's how can I create a tactical formation and a system that allows my team to have more of the ball in the attacking half of the opposition. So it wasn't just about keeping possession. It was about saying, well, can we create more chances in the opposition? Can we play the game in the opposition half? And even today, when I'm on the touchline, I just doesn't sit well with me when the opposition have the ball, and it certainly doesn't sit well with me when they have the ball in our defensive half. So that's kind of the foundations of sort of every system that I've had along the way. It's a bit like the reason people sort of play a game like Football Manager. It takes them into this world that they dream about, and it's the same with footballers. I kind of try and paint a picture that we're going to play football that they wanted to play when they were kids. When you're out in the street or out in the in the park and you've got the shirts down for the goalpost and you're playing 5v5, you're not worried about tactics or playing zonal or staying off the opposition. You just want the ball and you just want to play. A lot of what we do and what I do is trying to feed into that part of every footballer to say, well, let's take it back to where it all started and create a system and like I said, a way of playing that allows them to do the things they love to do. Every footballer loves to do: have the ball, be creative, score goals, be exciting. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that. There's a lot of discipline that goes into that. But most players respond because we train, all the time with that intent in mind. That our training's around, well, let's get on the ball and try and create something special. So that's kind of what underpins everything we do. When I first started, I was all over everything because I was pretty much the whole department. When I first started coaching, managing in South Melbourne, didn't have the resources, so I was all over it. But I always loved that side of it, so I kind of made sure I immersed myself in, and a lot of it was just around information, and that's evolved over time with the clubs I've been involved in, the levels I've been involved in. But the one thing that I've never let go is the final decision. That's mine, and if I'm going to make good decisions in that space, the more knowledge and information I have along the way is really important. It's it's where I grew up. I first went to the club when I was 8 years old, and I ended up from juniors. I was a ball boy for the senior team, and then worked my way through the ranks to senior football. Played for my club, captained my club, and then obviously to then go on and manage and coach a club. It was a dream scenario in real life, and I can see the attraction of people who jump on Football Manager and then want to do the same with their club, because it's one of those occupations where everyone feels they can be a manager, and I've certainly had plenty of advice over the years over the fence, and I'm sure all those people have had a real life go at it, with Football Manager, and it's your kind of dream scenario. I loved my time in Japan. It was probably the most challenging thing I've done, because one of my most sort of, I'd say, effective tools was taken away from me, and that was language. I literally walk into a room where no one understands anything I say. You don't have the ability to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with anybody. There needs to be another person in the room who's going to interpret your message, and you're not always 100% confident that message is getting sort of across in the way you want. So it was really challenging, but I loved it, because it kind of helped me improve my other communication tools as a manager. It allowed me to get creative about the way I kind of conducted, whether that was meetings or training sessions. And also, it gave me great belief, because even without language, I could see that my message was still getting through. It's a great country. They're very passionate about their football, got outstanding footballers. It certainly helped me when I went to Scotland, in that I knew that there was fantastic footballers there that probably people hadn't noticed because they were in Japan. So, a bit like my Football Manager experience, it allowed me to sort of, try and unearth guys who I knew were going to be fantastic footballers, but maybe the rest of the world didn't know about it. Where you're from that's your football club, and they're very strong on that. And I've loved that, and seeing how, even in the time I was there, how much it's grown. With clubs from every level, J3, J2, J1, challenging very quickly, going up the divisions and challenging for titles and cups. They've got a real clear vision about what they want it to look like. They've got a plan that they've got an 100-year plan that they're sticking to. I think they're in year 30-something of it, and if you follow it, they're almost following it to a T in terms of their expansion. J3 has now grown again with addition of more clubs, and I think you'll find in the next 10, 15 years, it'll be as strong as any of the strong European leagues, particularly with the talent coming through. When you win the league and you're champions after a sort of 14, 15-year absence, there's a lot of players, some are still there. I'll always have a bond with, Kibo, who's the captain of the club. When I got there, he was very much the junior member, but he's been there since he was a kid. There's photos of him on the wall being a junior at Yokohama, and he grew up adoring the club. We spoke about, playing for your hometown club. Well, he's the epitome of that, and now he's captain. He's won a couple of championships. I love him fullbacks. I had Kenny Matsubara, who was always good for a goal. He'd be brilliant in a fantasy and a Football Manager, because he doesn't play like a conventional fullback. I think what probably held back, sort of the floodgates opening for the talent they had was a little bit of people being unsure how players from that side of the world would adjust culturally over here, and also a little bit of a reluctance from, I think, Japanese players to embrace the fact that, they had to leave their shores and go into a new culture, to a country abroad. But I think what's happened since then is, I certainly felt when I was there, young Japanese players, are already understanding that, that they want to make this move, so they prepare themselves for it, whether that's learning language, English, Spanish, Italian, whatever it is, understanding the cultures they're going to. And, you've seen the impact that Mitoma has had at Brighton, and the Bundesliga has been really strong on taking players from Japan in particular, and providing they've had real successful careers. Champions League football is just unrelenting. It's fantastic. It's confronting. It challenges you in every way. You go into sometimes the most hostile of environments, facing the best footballers on the planet, with zero hope of achieving anything but believing that you can, you know. So it's also very addictive. You want to go back and do it again and again, and it is the sort of the pinnacle of club football. I'd just go hard on it, you know. Don't play safe at any time. The reality is you can win a Champions League and get sacked. I've seen that. So don't be afraid of anything. Just whatever you got in your mind, your wildest sort of dreams and aspirations, go for them. Do it in the most radical possible way, because even success doesn't guarantee you don't get the sack.